What up? Welcome to The Process. My name is Alex Earnest, and I will be What up? Welcome to The Process. My name is Alex Earnest, and I will be your host. On today's episode, we'll be exploring the struggle I've been having with losing perfection, with wanting this show to be just so perfect and so beautiful and so inspiring that it would change your life forever, and that you would all love me forever and and love everything I do for the rest of my life, and I'll never be rejected again. And so, but it sounds silly, but I want to talk about some of the real feelings and the real struggle I had with this week. And so we're going to be talking about the top 3 things I learned for the past week and diving into it from there. So thank you all so much. I hope you enjoy. What up? The first thing I learned this week is that you have to be willing to lose perfection in order to start. And I learned that in regards to this video. I took a week off from doing the daily videos that I had been doing. Hope you loved them. Hope you still love them. Follow me on Instagram if you want to see some more. But I took a week off, and in that week off, it gave me, I'd been so kind of in the swing of it, in the momentum of it, that I hadn't really taken the time to think about kind of why I was doing it, what I wanted to do, what would be the best way for it to look and be for people. I was sort of just doing it. I didn't really have time to really think about like more production sided stuff or how to storytell around it more effectively and all these things that I'm very interested in doing. And so taking that time off, I finally did do a lot of that stuff, but then that created this sort of vision of what it could be, what these videos could be, what I'm wanting them to be. And as it came closer to time for me to do them, the anxiety just ramped up really dramatically, and suddenly it went from me being just like so excited and so pumped and just loving what I'm doing and just getting out of bed like on the first time, not even snoozing, just like excited to do stuff, to suddenly I'm like sleeping in, I'm struggling to sleep, I'm procrastinating, I'm really struggling to do it, I'm not sure if I want to do it, and I start wondering like, am I really cut out for this? Do I really love it as much as I think I do? And all of these different things. And I realized, and I started getting really intensely anxious and focusing on, in particular, like how to do everything, like how to speak to you, how to storytell in segments around everything to make it more meaningful for you all, to make it so we're more deeply connected because you understand why these lessons that I'm learning are so important in the scale of my life. And the only way for you to understand that is if I'm explaining to you the meaning that they have to me through story. Story is how you convey meaning to people, or at least how I do it. So, all of this, like how to do the lights, how to do the camera, what kind of camera should I buy, how do cameras work, I don't really know how cameras work, how do you do this, should I write scripts, should I just freestyle it, should I just figure it out, should I just keep trying stuff, how do I do montage shots, what should I start recording, how to do b-roll, where do I get sound from, how do I do this, should I build a website first, how long should the videos be, what if I want to go longer, am I trapping myself, do I have to stay down? Just all of this intense like okay, how to do everything and make it work. And as it got closer and closer to time for me to start shooting, it became just this bigger and bigger and bigger weight and crushing responsibility from all these different things that I could be doing to make it better. And even now, as I'm here, I still feel a little underprepared, a little underperforming compared to what the vision of what this talk I'd imagine I would move myself to tears, and I would move you to tears, and I would change your life with the power and the meaning of my words. And that's really hard to do, that's really hard. And on a level, I don't know what I'm doing exactly, and I am still figuring it out. I know I want to help you, and I know I want to find a real love in this process for you and to share it with you, and I'm still trying to figure out how to do it. And so the first lesson I learned this week was that you have to be willing to lose that perfection, lose that dream, and lose the imaginary status that you gain from that, because whenever you haven't started taking action, you can treat yourself as if you are that dream because you haven't had reality to come and stress test you yet. Once you start doing it and you start realizing how difficult it is, then it's hard to hold yourself in the same self-esteem as if you're already there at that goal. And so you have to be willing to sacrifice that sort of false self-esteem that you can get from having the compelling vision, especially if you're articulate and able to explain it. For all you people that are really smart out there, can talk and can like explain your vision perfectly, and everyone gives you pats on the backs and tells you, oh, that's gonna be so great, you're gonna do wonderful, I believe in you, you can do it. You have to start taking action, because whenever the reality comes and you start realizing how far you actually are from that, although you lose that perfection, you lose that imaginary status, you gain something else. So that's the first thing I learned this week. What up? The number two thing I learned this week is the second thing I learned this week, the second most important thing, the second in this video that I learned, the second thing I learned this week is that my fear of being alone is what keeps me from committing to a path. So in that kind of time, that wake of time I had where I'm not making the videos and I'm thinking about whether or not I should be making them or not, I took a lot of time thinking about, I've had this habit of sort of pursuing something and putting like my all into it for maybe like 2 years, 3 years, or a year, and just really committing to that, and then kind of at the end of that feeling like I kind of wanted to change paths and kind of want to do something else and being interested in something else and following that. And so I was thinking about why, and since I had that not terribly long ago with novel writing, I've never really quite fully committed to something else except for poetry recently in a short burst. But I've never really committed to something else to that same extent again since that point. And I was trying to think about, why is it that I haven't committed? Why is it that before doing this video I'm having all of these anxieties and all this perfectionism? And a lot of it is a way to keep me from committing because of my fear of commitment. So I spent a lot of time thinking about, why am I afraid to commit? What's the core thing there? And I end up realizing that I'm afraid to commit because I'm afraid that if I commit myself to a path and follow it to the best of my ability, that I'll end up alone. And that's, there's a fear of success and a fear of failure there. Both versions work, because it's, if you're really bad at it but you're devoting yourself to it entirely, people will be embarrassed by you, no one will like you, no one will love you, and you'll get more and more desperate, and you'll drive yourself to being alone and isolating yourself because your ego will flare up. And if you're really successful, then a lot of times people, especially people that are successful, talk about how lonely it is at the top of the mountain, how lonely it is to be successful, how lonely it is whenever you're the one responsible for everything and you don't have anyone that you can turn to that's higher up than you, and you have to be the one that's making those hard decisions at the end of the day. And so I had this fear that if I were to pursue the journey and commit myself fully, that I would end up being alone. And this was really, this is really challenging for me. And I think it's amplified by the fact that whenever I did really commit myself to novel writing at one point, I got really obsessed. I got a little caught up in hustle culture, and I got obsessed with the idea of, if I wanted to be a full-time writer, then I needed to be working full-time hours. And so I was writing 6 hours a day on top of working full-time hours, and essentially isolated myself from all of my friends, isolated myself from relationships, and I was just alone most of the time just working on my stuff. And I also was running very seriously at the time, so between everything I was doing, there just literally wasn't time for me to see friends or to hang out with people. But I also felt so exuberant at that time, and I was seeing such massive growth from committing myself so fully and from working so hard and spending so much time learning, and I was having these really profound experiences and really grew in a lot of ways that were very, in like ways that changed my life forever. And so I really value that. So and I can be very obsessive, so there's this element of me that's afraid of letting myself go and letting myself just fully embrace something and obsess over it, because of the fear of me isolating myself, of overworking myself. And on a level, I understand that now I'm more aware of this and more aware of the importance of balance and of my social needs, as well as my desire to work and create. And so I feel like I'd be able to better balance it now. But, underneath my logical understanding of what's right for me to do and what I should be doing, there's some serious hurt emotions and some serious lack of trust, some concern, doubt, some fear about being alone, and being alone because of that commitment. In the same sort of way that in relationships, I think people can become afraid of committing because they're afraid of, what if I commit to this and then it doesn't work out, and then by the time I get out of it, I've become so weak or so unlovable, or no one can love me, that I'll end up alone forever. And so in a similar way, I've been having that with kind of my creative outlets and what I'm doing here. And so that was the second thing I learned this week, is my fear of being alone is preventing me from committing to something. And if I want to make the commitment to something, I have to be willing to take the risk, as well as an understanding that I will only be alone if I let myself be, that we're all endlessly alone in certain existential ways anyway. Can we ever really know each other? But at the same time, we're all so deeply interconnected that we are everything at once. And so loneliness is both inevitable and yet never actually occurs. It's weird to think about why I still struggle with trying to be perfect, and I think it might be about this kind of fantasy of control, that if I did it good enough, then everyone would just have to love me. They wouldn't have a choice, and I wouldn't have to worry about being rejected. I wouldn't have to worry about being left alone, or maybe it's status. Like, maybe I just want, it's like, if it was great, then people would have to say I'm smart and they couldn't deny me. But no matter if it's status or even if it's money, like, what do I want the money for, the fame for? At the end of the day, I think it's just about trying to be loved. And as silly as it might be, like, deep down, I don't want people to reject this. Like, I don't want people to reject me. I want to help them, and I want them to love me, and I want to love them, and I'm scared. And so that's why I think I still struggle with this. The third thing I learned this week is that your ego is a shield. I was really struggling with this week because I was getting really caught up in having my kind of fantasy and the vision of perfection that I had to give up in order to start, that I had to give up in order to be talking to you right now and doing this. I was struggling with kind of before I started and whenever I was still caught up in that vision, and how beautiful that vision was and how meaningful it was and how cool it was compared to so many things that I saw. I was getting sort of caught up in the ego around what it would be like if I was there, if I was at that point where I'd made it and everyone was loving it and everyone was supporting me and I was changing people's lives, and it was just this really beautiful thing that I'd love to do and how inspired I would be doing it. And so on a level, I was reacting and feeling distant and antagonistic to a world that wasn't responding to me as if I was a star now, as if I wasn't doing something beautiful now, because I could see this vision for where I was going and it seemed so clear to me, and the fact that the world didn't also see it for me and wasn't treating me as if I was the person that was going to do that was creating certain conflicts in my mind and making me feel distant from the people around me. And so whenever you're struggling with this, it can get really easy. And for a little bit, I was kind of beating myself up on the train of my ego's flaring up, and I'm, can I even do this? Am I even the person to teach this kind of stuff? Doesn't my ego flaring up mean I won't be the kind of person that makes it there in the first place? Because that ego flaring up means that I won't be willing to learn and have the humility and all this stuff. And what I want to normalize for you is that if you're someone who has these really big goals and dreams, but you're very far from it, the ego is just a shield that will come up to protect your sense of self. Sirens in the background constantly. But all right. But what I want to normalize for you is that if you have these big goals and big dreams, your ego is going to flare up, especially in the early stages of it, to protect your self-image of someone that's capable of doing that. As you're embarking on a path and you understand the direction that it could go to, and you have this vision for what you could do, and then people aren't treating you that way, it's natural for your ego to flare up. And yes, it's a bad thing. No, you shouldn't want to do it. No, I'm not saying to normalize it where it's just like, yeah, fully embrace it and just have it all the time and just don't care. I'm not trying to say that sort of thing, but what I'm trying to say is that it's naively optimistic to think that it's not going to happen to you. It's naively optimistic to believe that you're never going to struggle with this and you're never going to feel very far apart from the vision that you have for yourself, especially if you're someone who has big dreams and big goals, like huge things that you want to accomplish. And that was something I was struggling with this week, and I had to take the time to remind myself that it's okay for that to flare up and that to happen, but that I need to rein myself back in and detach myself from that vision of where I'm going to be and find the love for myself and where I'm at right now. And that in finding the love for where I'm at right now, I can share that love with you, and that's better for both of us. So don't let your ego continue to flare up, but allow your ego to flare up whenever it does. Understand why it's doing it, how it's doing it to protect you, and then center yourself on where you are now and find that love for where you are now. Thank you. What up? So this episode has been far from perfect, even though, I had these big hopes for it and still do. I still hope that this meant something to you. I still hope that it was able to connect to you. But I'm filming it on the phone. I still don't have an intro. I'm still figuring out how to edit. I'm still figuring out how to talk about it and how to storytell around this. There's a lot of parts of this that are very, very far from where I want them to be. My abilities as a speaker, my abilities to offer value to you all, my abilities to stay present and to really love what I'm doing without the self-consciousness of, am I doing it right? There's still a lot of room for me to grow. But I hope this offers value now, and I hope that by seeing me struggling with my own desires for perfection, by seeing me sort of stumble and just fumble my way through this, just doing the best I can with what I'm trying to do, I hope that it inspires you to do the same with the things that you want to do. I hope it inspires you to go out there and to try those things that you're afraid to do. I hope that it inspires you to give up those dreams that you're living off of, to stop telling people about the stuff that you want to do and start telling them about the stuff that you are doing. And I hope that you share it with us, and I hope that whenever you do, you love it no matter what anyone else thinks about it. Thank you all so much for being here. Welcome to the process. I hope to see you next week. Remember to like, comment, subscribe. Any feedback you have will help this become better and more perfect down the road, so I really appreciate it. I really appreciate everyone that's watching this. I know it's probably a bit of a mess, but I love you and I appreciate it. Thank you for being here. Thanks for sharing your time with me. Thanks for being interested in this kind of thing. All right. Much love. Keep learning.